groups. Here's counterterrorism analyst at the Heritage Foundation, Rob Simcox. We have former U.S. Army intelligence officer Andrew Peek and an executive vice president for the Center for Security Policy, Jim Hansen. Welcome to all three of you. Rob, let me start with you to that question of how big of an impact is. The conventional wisdom is it helps the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. Do you agree? What do you think happens tomorrow?
Well, actually, I think that you've got to remember that France has been living under a state of emergency now for 18 months. There's been a very constant string of terrorist attacks, terrorist plots, dozens of them in recent years. Attacks like that on the Charlie Hebdo magazine in Paris, the coordinated ISIS attacks in November 2015, Nice last summer. So if this has an impact, I think it will be because it's essentially the straw breaking the camel's back and French voters deciding that the status quo cannot go on, because we have to remember this is not normal, the amount of attacks that are taking place in France, and understandably French people are very concerned about it.
Well, to Rob's point, Jim, this has happened before, not only in these most recent attacks, but they went through it in an election in 2012 when there was a terror attack in the final weeks of that election, and the impact didn't really go the way the conventional wisdom was predicting it would. They thought maybe at the time it would help Nicolas Sarkozy, an incumbent, a conservative, but in fact a socialist one, if you remember, Jim, that time around, and Francois Hollande. So it's tough to predict politics, whether it's here or there, right?
Absolutely. I think one thing you can predict is that this has been a continued erosion of French nationalism. Now, the French are proud. They take their culture seriously. And one thing they've seen is that there is an escape clause from the European Union. The British did it. They saw that this is no longer a done deal. So as French culture reasserts itself, as they look at, the open borders, free travel, the mass of immigrants that have come in and have not assimilated, they say, why can't we be French again? And I think Marine Le Pen represents that sentiment, and I think that's going to help her. Whether it puts her over the top, we'll see. They're French.
Well, you brought up the British, and you're right. That is kind of the lens everybody is looking through this with. And before we go to Andrew, let me go to Nigel Farage, of course, who's become famous for that Brexit vote that they had in the UK. As Ed said before our last break here, some people are using the term Frexit with regard to this French election for whatever it's worth. I don't know why we need a term for all of this, but listen to what Nigel Farage had to say.
If Le Pen was to win, then Brexit, frankly, was nothing. It'll be the end of the European project.
That is dramatic, Andrew, the end of the European project. What do you make of it?
Well, look, I'm not necessarily sure that's a great thing for the United States. I mean, if the European fractures totally, then all you have is individual member states being subject to more Russian influence and more Russian domination. I think he's quite right. It would have a massive impact in undermining some of the kind of PC culture that will ultimately, I suspect, doom populists and nationalists like Marine Le Pen at the ballot box, since she has to face a second-round election if she comes in the top two in this one. On May 7th.
It is the point that Andrew brings up, Rob, that is an important one for us, right, for the United States and how we interpret all of this. I think the instinct among many, especially Trump supporters, is to say, yeah, nationalism's good. Look how it led to the election of Donald Trump here. However, is it in our interest, in the interest of the United States, to have someone like Marine Le Pen be the leader of France?
Well, taking Le Pen out of it for a second, I think that the European Union, you have to say, has got an awful lot of systemic problems and appears to be increasingly unpopular in Europe. Obviously, Britain epitomised that. There is a push not just for more nationalism, but for more sovereignty, more self-determination in Europe. I think these are principles that are obviously very familiar to American people, and Americans should be supportive of Europeans who want more sovereignty, more self-determination in their lives.
Quick answer, Jim, just because we have to wrap this up. What do you think happens, and what would be the best case for the U.S.?
I won't shed a single tear for the demise of the EU. I can understand, the danger that a fractured Europe presents, but I think we can deal with the individual nation states. I think they're stronger without a Eurocrat culture running things. And so we'll see if Marine Le Pen wins and brings that. Either way, I think they're heading that direction.
It's a very big story. We'll cover it some more tomorrow. Rob, Andrew, and Jim, thanks to all three of you.